This is the Inclusivity EQ podcast with Saul Gomez, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. The Inclusivity EQ podcast is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Saul Gomez.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash, and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming to another episode of the Inclusivity EQ podcast. My name is Saul Gomez, and I am your host. Today, we have a special guest today. We have Mr. Edwin Salguero, who is the CEO of Parallel LLC, which provides comprehensive business and management consulting services, which we'll dig into a bit more throughout the episode. Today, folks, we're specifically going to be talking about 2 things: data-driven workforce insights and expanded talent pipeline and retention. And we're going to talk about why this conversation is so timely and valuable for all of us. As AI and automation reshape skill requirements across industries, this is forcing organizations to use data analytics for strategic workforce planning. The ongoing talent reshuffling continues, with workers prioritizing flexibility and development over traditional careers. Now, companies are leveraging data for talent decisions and are showing measurable advantages in both acquisition and retention. And with replacement costs at 1.5 to 2x annual salary per departed employee, Edwin's dual expertise in data science and management offers invaluable insights for organizations navigating these converging challenges. So without further ado, welcome, Edwin. Thank you for coming to the show. I'm excited to have you and have this conversation and dive into today's episode.
Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and to speak with all your viewers and listeners, and kind of just to see where this conversation takes us.
Sounds great. Absolutely. First, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what got you to where you are now.
So I grew up in Northern Virginia. I graduated from Oakton High School in 2003. Previous to that, I went to Luther Jackson Elementary School, and had gone to Bailey's Elementary in Coolmore in Falls Church. A very kind of like humble beginnings, right? And so my mom had always stressed to me the importance of education, higher learning, and everything. And so I got my my undergrad in social science with a business concentration from Virginia Wesleyan University, and that was really born out of the understanding how society functions and then how business interacts with society, right? And so that led me to pursue data science for a master's degree. During my undergrad, I had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of research that touched on social systems, organizational systems, and behavioral economics. So I had learned programming in undergrad, and I was just like, I want to find something that's like that sits at the center of tech and research, really. And so I found that data science provided that avenue.
Awesome. Now, with that, right, your background spans government, private, and even international sectors. Can you expound a little bit about that and your professional journey and how you develop this I don't know, this cross section of expertise, if you will?
Yeah, so I had extensive experience across multiple sectors, and so I would say we could begin with like my government service. I used to work in for the state of Virginia, actually, for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, and that was seeing overseeing critical Medicaid service authorization projects and
Mhm.
projects that directly impact the community. So within that, I had oversight of basically all of Northern Virginia, and that basically goes down from all the way from like Leesburg to Fredericksburg to Culpeper, but it involved a lot of setting systems up, creating social systems, um, understanding and implementing basically legislative policy as
Mhm.
well, and then understanding how the impact of those programs and funds, basically understanding the outcome of that funding. So I did that for about 5 years and had a lot of opportunity where I got to basically help write some of the current Medicaid policy that's in effect in the state of Virginia. I got to do a lot of training with a lot of executives that had their own companies, and as well as basically people at the federal, state, and local levels, right? So just basically channeling all their input and funneling all that into this system that's really meant to support adults who have special needs.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And so help our listeners understand, right? So it sounds like you're doing a lot of human centric stuff, a lot of people oriented things. Um, how did you, or what drove you to pursue data science specialization after your background in essentially the social sciences? And further, how do these disciplines really complement each other in the work that you do?
Oh, so yeah, basically when I remember just when we look at funding, when I looked at
Mhm.
funding at the state, it was all data. So basically, somebody might write a plan and you're looking at the effects of how they're going to live their lives from day to day, and
Mhm.
how that funding is going to take them to a different level. So there's a vast ocean of data, and I was involved during that time in giving input into the tech stack, into even there were times, even I remember just going through doing a query, and I was just like, hey, there's a bug in this, like it's not generating the correct number. And I did like the math, and I was like, yeah, there's a bug in this. We have to like track this down, this because it's we're not the only ones getting this information. The rest of the state is getting this information,
Right.
you know? So it came from just for like 5 years, just studying data, looking at data systems, and then understanding the pain points that each county goes through. They have like different data systems, and the state's pain point was we've got 100 different data systems. How do we get all this data into one system, right?
Right.
So it kind of just came out of that. It's just like, how do we collect data? How do we act on data? And by the time that I was leaving the organization, I think within like the last quarter or
Mhm.
so, there was actually a departmental meeting where they said, "Hey, here's our like next here's our roadmap for to become more
Mhm.
analytically driven over the next couple of years." And so it really did come out of this out of like my academic training, and then working with the state of just continuously studying data and acting on data. I recall there were definitely times when I went to a few companies that basically had to operate off the funding, and they didn't operate off data. And at that point, it's kind of like trying to shoot your shot in the dark, right? It's you don't know what the yeah it's like you don't know. You might have like an objective, but you don't have a way to measure if you're meeting that objective, how you're making
Right.
progress on that objective as well. So I just wanted to become very fluent in guiding people to become more analytically driven.
I like the way you put it. Be more fluent, right? Because I think it necessitates a lot of different skill sets, right? Not just the analytical piece, but then being able to contextualize it and connect the dots, if you will, right? And so I think that's a really great segue into our first topic, right? Which is the data-driven workforce insights. Can you, I guess, set the stage for us and tell us a little bit about what exactly data-driven workforce insights are, and why do they matter?
Yeah. So uh, data-driven workforce insights, it just involves analyzing employee and operational data to
Mm-hmm.
inform business decisions, right? So that's going to be related to a company's staff, uh, of how they basically manage their staff, so their HR management processes, how they engage with their employees, how their employees are performing, how an organization itself is performing, and at the end of the day, it's how they're retaining employees and able to scale their operations up.
Got it. Now, based on your experience, what would you say are the most significant ways that organizations are using data to transform their workforce management?
So a lot of what I've seen is this digital transformation that's been going on for the past few years. And I've seen it implemented specifically really in I would say in like HR hiring processes, right? Trying to build a candidate pool, trying to trying to get the right skill sets as well, and then companies themselves becoming more data driven. I recall one project where we were sent in to basically help them create an offboarding process, and we had to look through all their data. We had to look through employee data. We had to look through employee files, and kind of just say, okay, what does the offboarding process consist of? And at the end of the day, they were using that for two objectives. One, to measure how satisfied employees were and why they were leaving. And two, to ensure that they had all compliance measures covered, right? Like make sure you deactivate someone's key fob. Make sure you deactivate like someone's access to to a database, you know?
Or deactivate their email, right?
Exactly,
I mean, a
exactly.
lot of times organizations are still paying for an email just for someone who left the organization months, sometimes in excess of a year. Those licenses cost money, and that money adds up, right? I think that makes a really valid point. The cost of not doing data-informed, data-driven decision making, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we found through doing that analysis and kind of standing up this application within this platform for this agency. They were definitely delighted, but you could really see how much more streamlined and productive they were in the before and after snapshot. Their before snapshot was nothing but basically just paper, right? It's just like here's a paper and I've got to fax it. And that whole process could take about 3 to 4 months. And now they've got this digital thing that takes like 3, 4 days.
It makes a night and day difference, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell me, like when it comes to small, even some medium-sized companies, right, that have limited data infrastructure, how can they even begin implementing data-driven decision making for their workforce management?
Yeah, and this is a great question. And it's definitely start with the data that you currently have. But number one is you have to begin by defining clear business objectives and focusing on easily obtainable data sources. So like in an instance of HR workforce data, that should be like data that an organization is collecting, something that they're able to track, right? Either if it's around measurements for like retention, for turnover, attendance, or performance metrics. And I would say kind of just build out gradually from there. Depending on where the organization is, I would say sometimes it's even like having a few CSV files or Excel files is the right way to go, and
Right.
then scaling up from there, right, to see if it's the right solution. Anytime an organization could be starting from like zero and they want to get to a point where they're able to take action on their data, I always like to remind them saying it's a marathon process, because it's change management. And while you grow your processes out, you're growing your staff out, you're acting on data, you're making decisions based on data. So that roadmap is like 2 to 3 years, right? Before you can start getting into a point where you're so comfortable with the data that it's just second nature.
No, absolutely. It's really inoculating folks, right? And you're talking my language when you talk about change management, because a lot of initiatives often fail because the right change management strategy was utilized, right? Whether the messaging wasn't there, whether people didn't, consider the resistance that would happen, and at the end of the day, you end up with this expensive paperweight that nobody uses, and that's the unfortunate sometimes cost of not being methodical about that, or thinking about what are the parameters, how should I approach this. And arguably, right, and all of what you said, a lot of times I've noted that, privacy, especially this day and age, is huge, right? And so that's another consideration. And, in reading your bio, man, you've done a lot of great things. I want to be like you when I grow up. But you did some work with Georgetown University, and I'd like you to touch on a little bit, right? Because it kind of surrounded some privacy enhancing technologies. Can you talk a little about those, and then how can they be applied specifically to workforce data and employee privacy of all things?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was some work that I'd done with an organization called the Open Mind Foundation. I had actually met the founder um, when I was a grad student at Northwestern, and he's getting his PhD at Oxford.
Mm.
And so he had this foundation, and he's just like, we're using ML, AI, data science to build like the next level of knowledge sharing, to build this next level of data sharing. And so I was like, that sounds really, really interesting, And so I got the opportunity to help them, to sit down with them, help them like test their algorithm, develop their algorithm, and found out like a couple weeks ago that the work had been published. And so,
Congratulations.
oh, thank you so much. And so it's awesome seeing where data science is going, right?
Mhm.
Where you're talking about like encryption, you're talking about almost like basically identity verification, all these things that have previously just been synonymous with like computer science. It's just like the term computer science is taken on so many different levels now. And I would say, and I don't want to get too long-winded into this, but that work of like with open mind as it applies to, I would say, like workforce development or just
Sure.
workforce management. If you've got like any employee data is always going to contain like PHI or PII to an
Right.
extent, you know. And so the way that anonymizing employee data could work for not only one organization, several different organizations, as a matter of fact, uh, an insurance company could basically meet with not meet an insurance company could be working with a specific employer, right? And instead of saying, hey, let me sit down with your head of HR and kind of just look through these files, that insurance company with this algorithm platform can effectively just analyze that data without having to do an NDA, without having to know exactly what's contained in the data set, if that makes
Right.
sense. But that's basically saying I don't know what it is until I see this data, right? So
Right.
you're not so it's almost like what is that term in the military? I forgot. Or in like clear facilities, it's like need to know
Right.
aspect.
Right. Do you have a clearance, or do you have a need to know?
Yeah, so this like it's almost like that need to know. This algorithm does that need to know. It's just like if you need to know it, you'll have the algorithm and then you'll have the data, you know? And so it's a it provides anonymization and transmission. So basically if I have this data and I transmit it, there's no way there are going to be any leaks through that data. And in that same instance, you could have a chamber of commerce, a government, and an employer all working through this platform, through this data at the same time, and everything updates at the same time. You could be across the world and working on this. So it provides anonymization. It speeds up productivity, and I would say it definitely adds like it helps add that other layer of data governance,
Sure.
the human component.
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus, what I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
No, absolutely. And I think those are some phenomenal ethical considerations that all organizations should prioritize, right? When collecting any kind of employee data. Now, you said something earlier. You said AI. So I'm curious to know, because, it's such a fascinating space, right? Not just from a coding perspective, but like, how do you implement AI into an organization, right? Because that's a whole nother ball of wax, right? But I'm curious to know, from your perspective, how has AI and machine learning changed the landscape of workforce analytics in the last couple of years, even?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, now you have basically entire systems and AI systems. I was reading a dissertation the other day about workforce analytics. And so you're seeing so many models now that have primarily been used in defense, that have been primarily basically used in like in crisis management. You've got these models that are designed to ingest data in real time and then act on that data. So
Right.
a lot of the advancements that I've seen is like in the type of models that are being used, because it's like the same data that's always been there. But I think what we're seeing now definitely is more. I think organizations are becoming more intentional about how they're collecting data, right? And even then how they're structuring their data. I think they're starting to understand a little bit more about data needs to be at a certain level before like AI or ML can come in, right? Because there's so much like data wrangling and cleaning that has to be done in order to run those models. But I would say that,
Data, yeah, absolutely. The data cleansing alone is a beast, right?
oh yeah.
And then you get into metadata, right? Like, do you have reference data? What type of data do you have? And I don't know, it's so nuanced, right? But I think AI does present some opportunities to optimize, right? Optimize with the right parameters and with the right considerations, because it's like anything, right? Crap in, crap out. So,
Yep.
I'm always cautious when consulting when clients want to incorporate AI. Well, are you ready for AI, right? Because if not, it's an expensive effort. And if you've got Jeff Bezos money or, billionaire type of money, then okay, let's do that. Let's crack some eggs. But I think being judicious about it is always probably the best recipe, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's move on to this other topic, right? About expanded talent pipeline and retention, because that really, fascinated me when I saw, that, you want to talk a little bit about that. I was really excited because I think it's such an interesting space right now, especially especially in the government sector, right? Where everyone's returning to work from remote work or telework and all these agreements. It's certainly, impacting the landscape of talent and how we go about retaining people. So what are the biggest blind spots that you see in how organizations approach talent acquisition and retention, most importantly?
I think it's like part of it is that marketing piece, right? And then also part of it is also like I would say what's being put out there. I know I've seen like some job recs where it's asking for a certain, like, are you fluent in this model, and you have to have 15 years of experience in it, when it's kind of like that tech hasn't even been out for like 5 years. You know?
Right.
So I think it's like I think it's all I think part of it is making sure that employers are marketing, like rolling the job out correctly,
Mhm.
and understanding what the regional and local pool looks like for what they're trying to achieve. You cast a wider net, you're going to catch more fish, right? So that's where we see this whole thing about virtual work, remote and hybrid, and we see employers offering those things to widen like the candidate pool. But yeah, I would definitely say that at least from what I'd seen in what I've experienced before, I recall one organization where they were looking to increase their candidate pool. They wanted a bigger pipeline of candidates. And so I sat down and I looked and I asked them, what's your current effort? And they say, oh, we've posted it on LinkedIn. And I was just like, that's a start. I was just like, but what are your KPIs? What are your key performance indicators that, you have to have this job filled by this date, or you have to have an X amount of of resumes by this date. So you have to be a little bit more intentional. So
Right.
I remember just sitting down with them and saying, there are some companies in the financial industry right now that are doing great work with marketing how they get a job out there, and
Mhm.
kind of like their recruiting efforts. So I remember just sitting down with them and saying, how quickly do you want this to happen? And then how far do you really want? Like, how far do you want to go? And they're like, we'd like to establish a candidate pool pretty within like the next like quarter or so. I was just like, okay, so
Mhm.
I would say let's expand beyond LinkedIn, and let's be a little bit more intentional. Look at different sites. Either look at like, where you can position yourself for like a virtual job fair or something. But I think that the biggest thing is we're going from this like kind of like I don't want to say antiquated, but this traditional method of we'll put a job rec out there and then we'll basically we'll go and check. We're seeing a lot of digital transformation occurring. There's a company called JobBot that literally their platform goes out on LinkedIn and searches through candidates. And so what we're seeing is this next level of recruitment effort, right? That's automated, that's occurring online, that's occurring in a digital space.
Got it. No, it's fascinating stuff. I'm wondering, just from your experience and exposure to all that, how can companies leverage their existing data to create more inclusive cultures, right? That attract a broad cross section of talent that may help their talent sourcing and retention efforts.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think it's almost like basically you're democratizing access to career opportunities and skill building and professional network. At least that's the way that I see it. So there's a big
Right.
emphasis on technology, and then you want it to be data driven, and then at that you want it to be like almost like in a sense AI driven, right? So through AI driven platforms, through virtual training, remote collaboration tools, using those tools to look at your basically what geographic barriers exist, what systemic barriers exist, right? Are
Mhm.
we creating opportunities? Are we emphasizing skills over credentials, over traditional credentials or referrals? Um, are we looking at basically real-time assessments? And then when we're looking at career development, are we operating in a silo, or is it that, we're responding to what the market is like needs from us, right? So it's it gets down to a level where you're able to offer like a personalized support for your employee, saying, what is
Mhm.
it that you need to enhance your skill set, to grow your network, right? To knock down these barriers for you.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think about the MBA, right? As I don't know, to me, an interesting example of talent acquisition, right? Because they source it from globally, right? And they get this phenomenal talent, and then a lot of times they all go to their own respective countries to go compete, right, in the Olympics. it's like, oh man, that was American talent. Well, we sourced it from somewhere else, and now they're going to go compete, for their respective nations, which is great. And I often wonder if we can scale that down and apply it nationally, right? To source diverse talent within the U.S., right? Where are those pockets and talent pools that we don't even think about all the time that may have the employee or the next executive with the $1 billion idea, right? How do we apply that strategy? And so I'm really curious, because in your bio, right, you're a certified Scrum Master. So and I'm really curious to hear how you've seen or how you apply these methodologies to impact team retention and satisfaction.
Yeah. So a lot of it goes with knowing like the role, right, that I play. Is a lot of it is like servant leadership when you're like a project manager, a program manager, or Scrum. And a lot of it is like you have to lead from the back, I feel like.
Okay.
There's this instance of leading from the front, but I always love to empower my team, I always say to them, I was just like, you all went to college, you're all adults, and you all have been doing this for a very long time. Utilize me as as a resource, right? It's just like, how is it that everyone knows their role adequately? How is it that everybody knows their responsibilities? And how is it that everybody's feeling their impact as part of this cohesive collaborative effort? Like, how is it that we blend their energy and their outputs into the final deliverable, right? And so a lot of what I like to do is just, like I say, kind of like leading from the back. It's not like saying I have a hands-off approach. It's more of me going to my team and asking them, is this really a risk for us, or is it not? Because this person is reporting that it is a risk and you're reporting that it's not. So, you can have them communicate, or you can funnel that communication, but it's almost like acting like a linchpin for everything to keep everything together and just to keep like the ball moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really genius way of approaching that, because I think there's such a thing as healthy levels of dissent, right? Yeah. We can disagree and still get to the objective, but if anything at all, we walk around with a different perspective, right? We take away a different perspective we didn't have before that we might be able to apply elsewhere. And so I think agile modalities, human-centered design, Scrum, those type of approaches bring that collegiality and synergy where you otherwise might not have had it, because people have, that psychological safety to be able to say, hey, boss, I don't like this. Let me push back. And here's why. Here's what I'm offering it as an alternative solution, right? And maybe it's great. Maybe it sucks, but maybe it's applicable to something else, right? But keep them coming, because that's how we get to those. That's how we innovate, right? And so it's a really fascinating space when leaders are able to use different modalities and different practices like Scrum to empower people, right? And so I think that's a key component to your point, right? A linchpin in that, in team collegiality and team performance. Now, how can, kind of tying it back to data science, how would you suggest that data science help companies identify barriers and challenges to recruiting the top talent?
Yeah, I would say so. If we're looking at it, then it's like, an organization would measure their diversity and inclusion indicators. If we want to create a bigger candidate pool from these underrepresented communities, so what's the demographic representation across levels, across pay equity? Are there promotion patterns occurring?
Right.
What's like the employee sentiment internally? And then like, are there inclusion scores that are being tracked, right? So these are like sophisticated analytical models, but an organization can identify systemic barriers, systemic biases, and allow targeted actions like a mentoring program or a targeting recruiting initiative, or even like leadership training focused on inclusion.
Right.
So it's almost like, again, I say it, but it's being very intentional about the strategy, like a company's data strategy. Right? So And it's also like having to share these metrics transparently and
Yeah,
internally and have those conversations to create that trust, create that like accountability, and then to basically honestly have an organization commit to inclusion.
sure. And I'm glad you said that, right? Because I think it works both ways, right? I think transparency can help validate or refute notions, right? And if you
Yeah.
don't talk about them, people are going to go with what they perceive. I say that because it works both ways. We had a client once that was in Middle America and was concerned about diversity numbers, and they were concerned that it was a predominantly white area population to begin with, so the organization was predominantly white, and they were concerned that they had a very, very, very small cross section of minorities, let alone African American representation, and their representation in their organization was like 7 or 8% African American, right? And so there were concerns about optics, but when we dug into that, the region as a whole, right, the African American population was, I think, less than 3%. So they're already twice the number of the population have represented, in the organization. So they're already above and beyond. It's just when you look at numbers alone without injecting the context,
Yeah.
the narrative can get really skewed in a negative way. In this case, they were trying to shield that. And I told the leader, no, you need to showcase this. You're doing double what the population is. I don't know how you're doing it, but good on you. This is a win.
Yeah.
And when we kind of talk to them, they're like, oh, wow, I never saw it that way. Because I think a lot of times there's merit in the qualitative, but the quantitative is just as important because it paints a whole picture. And so I think for organizations that are maybe a little bit overcritical or don't necessarily believe in the whole DEI piece, diversity, equity, inclusion, I think there's a business case to validate what they're already doing. Because I think a lot of organizations are doing a great thing, but if the population just isn't there, you can't squeeze water out of a rock, right? And you can only do so much outreach. You can only do so much recruitment, but where you can, you should.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and to the point of your story, it sounds like basically they exceeded what they were
Right.
supposed to with what they have available. So that's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it really changed the narrative. It really changed the optics of the organization as a whole, especially when the leader got out in front and said, hey, look, here's where we're at. And here's the reality of it. Here's the numbers. The math is mathing, right? We're doing great. But no, this is great, man. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and man, I'd love to bring you back and talk about some other things and kind of dig into some other stuff that we kind of talked about. I think AI in the space of inclusion and just in the space of humanity is such a fascinating field, and we can probably have an episode alone about that. So I'd love to have you back, man, because you do a lot of other things we're not touching on right now, but I did want to hone in on these things. And so as we kind of close out, if you can go back and, talk to organizations and give them some advice with regards to, talent pipeline and retention and data-driven workforce insights, what would you tell them to start as a starting point?
I would say, what is the objective they're trying to reach as a business? That's always like, if like define it on paper first and then get some data to test your assumption.
Okay.
Very methodical, right? Because I think we sometimes, and I've had it myself too, where I had an assumption and I tried to make it work, but the data didn't show it, or the data wasn't even there for me to prove that assumption. So I think it always starts at like, what is it? What's the objective?
Mm-hmm.
And what data is available to test that objective? That way, it's just like you're not scaling up a bunch of resources and then spending time and coming back and saying, oh, this isn't what we wanted. It's like it's almost like you take that small swing so that you're not exerting all your effort and then saying, I'm too tired to keep trying. So it's like it's building into that marathon pace.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. As we start to wrap up, I'm going to circle back around to the start of the episode, which is introducing you, and I want to get some personal insights from you. What's a book that's significantly influenced your approach to leadership or data science or both?
Yeah. So I would say for definitely for data science and to an extent, yeah, leadership as well is Designing Data Intensive Applications by Martin Kleppmann. That was a text in graduate school um, when um, when I was going through my analytics application engineering courses. And it reminds me a lot of just being a leader, of just what's the right system at the right time,
Hmm.
and how do I basically take all this information slash data, retain it, and how do I basically act on it? And it sounds kind of abstract to an
Mhm.
extent, but I have found a lot of leadership is having the right processes and the right systems in place at the right time. Not every shoe is going to fit. It's more about knowing which shoe is the right shoe to put on at what time.
What was the name of the book and author again?
Designing Data Intensive Applications by Martin Kleppmann.
Got it. Martin Kleppmann. Write that down, folks. Sounds pretty interesting. Coffee or tea? And how does that fuel your day?
Coffee at the beginning of the day. I usually have like 2 cups of coffee to get my morning going. One right at the beginning of the morning, and run probably right toward lunch. And I
Okay.
think it's just part of it's almost like part of my daily routine now. It's just like get some coffee, spend some time looking through emails, spend some time looking through either like Slack or Teams. Finished off my first coffee. It's like, okay, now let's get rolling. Now it's time to
Right.
start working. So it feels like it's almost like going on a run in the morning, or going
Yeah.
on a stretch. It's like mentally, it's just like it wakes me up.
So I'm a coffee snob. So bold or light or medium? What kind of roast?
Honestly, I like bold roast, and it
Mhm.
depends. So I like a bold roast on like a weekday morning because it gives me like just that jolt to wake me up. And then I would say like a medium or a lighter roast. I would typically on the weekends, where I'm kind of just like more or less just like sipping on it. But yeah, getting a strong cup of coffee definitely just like wakes me up.
Nice. Um, with all the stuff you have going on, right? I ask guests all the time, whether you have a family, whether it's just you and a dog, you and a cat, whatever your personal dynamics are.
Mhm.
You are much like a lot of the guests on this podcast, have a lot of things going on, lots of plates in the air, spinning and doing all these things and all these acrobatic, things that you do. How do you maintain your work-life balance while juggling everything?
Oh yeah. So I'm getting married May 24th. Uh,
Congratulations. Wow.
Thank you, thank you. And so my fiance and I would say what we've found is we're like very purposeful about spending time with one another. It's like
Mhm.
nothing else exists when we like set this block for each other, right? And so try to make it purposeful about like going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, taking a walk together, cooking some dinner together, and then like for myself and my own, I'll go on a run, or I'll read a book or something.
Mhm.
But it's having a space and time away from the day-to-day grind, just to check in with like loved ones, check in with friends, check in with family, and almost like checking in with yourself too. So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
even if I sometimes it's great, I'll have like a few hours where I could spend some time with her, or basically get some stuff done. And sometimes it's just like, hey, only have like an hour today, but like just let's make the most out of it.
Right.
Mhm.
No, that's awesome to hear. I've been married for 26 years, and I can tell you the whole cooking thing. I That's my zen. I've got to do it myself. Leave me alone. Don't talk to me. I will come up with the greatest meal in the world, but leave me alone. That and my lawn. I love my lawn. I geek out on my lawn. I love walking on it barefoot and just do the whole grounding thing. But
Mhm.
man, those two things are sacred. Do not infiltrate. Do not encroach. Leave me alone. I'm out, I'm unplugged. I'm out of office. But I learned that over the course of time and many arguments and nights of sleeping on the couch or whatnot. But that's neither here nor there. um, what current project are you most excited about right now that you're working on? If you can share.
Yeah. So I'm actually working on a one project. Actually looking at federal contracting for the past 5 years, alongside because I'm also a member of the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus, and so the chair and I were looking through federal data, given everything that's going on right now with how contracts are going away and things are shrinking. Uh, I'm actually looking at what the levels were and actionable insights that can be taken. And so I can talk quickly. There was like one finding there specifically affecting what's called a hub zone. Uh,
Okay.
and and so I found that for basically some of the I found that there's room for basically the funding to increase for Hub. And that funding would actually lead to more R&D opportunities, specifically in the private sector. And so that's one project that I'm working on right now is looking at federal contract data and
Hmm.
how the money has been allocated, and then basically creating actionable analytics so that we can make recommendations to agencies and to legislators as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Man, that sounds so fascinating. Keep me abreast on how that thing's going. I'm sure some things you're probably not going to be able to share, but definitely interested in seeing how that work develops.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. Um, any advice you have for our listeners as we kind of close out about implementing data-driven approaches to workforce engagement or talking about retention, talent pipeline acquisition and retention?
Yeah, I would say anybody who's gaining interest in becoming more data driven, more analytically driven. There's so many groups out there on Meetup, on Slack, Open Data Science conference. So many communities out there. When I made my initial jump from like social science to data science, I was just like, this is more research and more technical than what I'm used to, and I just started including myself in these groups, started attending these groups just to absorb that knowledge. So if someone's personally looking to grow in that space, I would say make use of like Meetup, of Space, of these open source communities. But as far
Yeah.
as like an organization goes, for like becoming more purposeful and intentional about like their workforce insights or their workforce analytics, always start with HR, start with the data that they have, and ask that one question, basically saying, what data is it that we have right now, and what can we do with that data?
Well, folks, that does it for today's episode of the Inclusivity EQ podcast. My name is Saul Gomez. I'm your host. And remember to continue to develop your own Inclusivity EQ. Until the next one, out here.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to the Inclusivity EQ podcast with Saul Gomez. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum